The air crackled with anticipation, not from static electricity, but from the sheer tension packed into St. Anselm University's lecture hall. Every seat was filled, a sea of faces illuminated by the harsh glare of press cameras, their incessant flashing a staccato rhythm to the brewing drama. Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary, a whirlwind of blonde ambition in a world of seasoned politicos, stepped into the lion's den, the Education and Politics in the 21st Century Symposium. She tried to melt into a back row seat, hoping for anonymity, but it was futile. Dr. Williams, a renowned calculus professor with a liberal bent sharper than Occam's razor, had already spotted her. His eyes, usually twinkling with academic amusement, held a glint of something colder, something predatory. He disliked Leavitt, saw her as a manufactured product of the Trump era, a talking head elevated by luck and media spin, not genuine intellect. A sinister smile stretched across his face. "Today, class," Dr. Williams announced, his voice dripping with a sarcastic sweetness that sent shivers down Karoline's spine. "We have a special guest." He paused for effect, letting the camera zoom in on Leavitt's increasingly uncomfortable face. "Miss Leavitt, often hailed as intelligent. Let's put that to the test, shall we?" With a flourish that was almost theatrical, he scribbled a monstrous integral onto the board, a tangled nest of variables and functions that would make even the most seasoned math majors break out in a cold sweat. This wasn't just a problem. It was a public execution, meticulously designed. "Why don't we see if she can solve this?" he challenged, his eyes gleaming with mischief. He was going to prove, in front of this audience of students, and crucially, a handful of strategically placed reporters, that she was an empty shell. Before we dive deeper into the showdown, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow, I've got an absolutely amazing story lined up just for you. You won't want to miss it. The lecture hall fell silent, the only sound the rhythmic scratch of chalk as Dr. Williams finished his intricate, intimidating equation. It wasn't a standard textbook exercise. This was a beast, a nested function overflowing with variables, the kind that made even top-tier students sweat. The professor's eyes sparkled with a predatory glee as he approached the board. "Today, class," he began, his voice resonating with a theatrical flair, "we'll be tackling some extremely challenging calculus problems. And, given our special guest, someone lauded as a genius," he drawled the word with exaggerated emphasis, "why don't we see if she can handle it?" Students exchanged nervous glances, some stifling chuckles, others tensing up, feeling the vicarious pressure on Leavitt's behalf. Reporters, sensing blood in the water, zoomed in closer, their lenses fixated on the young press secretary. This was the moment Dr. Williams had been meticulously crafting, the public humiliation of the White House press secretary. Karoline Leavitt, heart pounding but face a mask of composure, stood and approached the board, chalk in hand. Her eyes scanned the problem, not with panic, but with a focused intensity. Without a flicker of hesitation, she began to write. The chalk flowed smoothly, each step unfolding with a crystalline clarity. Variable substitution, function simplification, then the elegant dance of partial integration. The students held their breath, a few sneaking peeks at their own notes, trying to keep up. In a mere 2 minutes, an astonishingly short time, she set the chalk down. The complete answer, flawlessly derived, was displayed on the board. Perfect, down to the last decimal. "Done," she said softly, turning to face Dr. Williams, a hint of a challenge in her otherwise neutral tone. The room erupted in a murmur of disbelief. "Did she really just do that?" one student whispered, awestruck. "That was insanely fast," another exclaimed. Dr. Williams stood frozen, the smug smile on his face stiffening, becoming a rictus of disbelief. He stepped to the board, his eyes darting over each line, searching, hoping for a mistake, a flaw, anything to salvage his carefully constructed trap. But there was nothing. He cleared his throat, desperately trying to mask his discomfort. That... that was just a warm-up, he stammered, his voice lacking its previous confidence. Don't get too full of yourself. But inside, he was rattled. He'd expected Leavitt to stumble, to falter, perhaps even to give up entirely, proving his point that she was nothing more than a pretty face coasting on political connections and loyalty to Trump. Yet, she'd solved the problem, as if it were second nature. The students exchanged looks, their initial skepticism dissolving, replaced by a dawning curiosity. Reporters scribbled furiously, recognizing the shift in the narrative. This was becoming a very interesting story. Leavitt returned to her seat, still outwardly composed, but her mind was racing. Memories flooded back. Memories of her time at St. Anome, where she'd taught herself advanced mathematics, not for academic accolades, but as a tool. She'd used it to analyze election data, to craft media strategies, to understand the complex, often chaotic, world of politics. To her, math wasn't just a collection of abstract symbols. It was a language, a way to decipher patterns, to predict outcomes, to understand everything from voter trends to the impact of policy decisions. A small, discreet smile played on her lips. She knew Dr. Williams wasn't finished. He turned, chalk in hand again, his eyes flashing with a renewed, almost desperate defiance. "Well then," he said, his voice tightening with a forced bravado. "Now for the real challenge. Let's see what you can do with this." He wrote a new problem, even more complex, even more daunting than the first, as if driven by a primal need to regain control. The students, sensing the escalating stakes, grew even more tense. The atmosphere in the room thickened, heavy with anticipation. The second problem emerged, a formidable chain of nested derivatives, demanding razor-sharp reasoning and a deep, intuitive understanding of calculus. Dr. Williams crossed his arms, a smug confidence returning to his face. This time he was certain Leavitt would fail. "Go ahead, Miss Leavitt," he mocked, his voice dripping with disdain. "Or do you need a spokesperson to step in for you?" A few students chuckled nervously, but the laughter quickly died down as Leavitt stood again. She walked to the board, chalk in hand, her gaze sharp and unwavering. "Thank you for the challenge, Professor," she said, her voice calm, but brimming with a quiet confidence that sent a ripple of unease through Dr. Williams. She began writing, and the room fell silent once more. The chalk moved swiftly, decisively across the board, Leavitt unraveling the complex problem with an almost breathtaking precision. She paused for a fleeting second, glanced at the students, and offered a small, almost conspiratorial smile. "Derivatives are like figuring out how things change," she explained, her voice surprisingly engaging, "like predicting the outcome of an election." When the simple, relatable analogy made a few students nod in understanding. She finished the problem, the answer, once again flawlessly executed. Dr. Williams's hand gripped the edge of the board, his knuckles white. The students' jaws dropped. A girl whispered almost reverently, "Is she actually a genius?" Reporters zoomed in, knowing this clip, this moment would explode across social media. Leavitt set the chalk down, turning to face Dr. Williams, a question in her eyes. "Anything else, Professor?" she asked, her tone gentle but undeniably challenging. He took a deep breath, struggling to maintain his composure. Not so fast," he growled, his voice losing its edge. "We're not done yet." He erased the board, his hand trembling slightly, preparing to unleash his final, desperate gambit. The students exchanged glances, sensing the unfolding drama was far from over. Leavitt stood there unfazed, a quiet strength radiating from her, ready for whatever he threw her way. The air in the lecture hall grew thick and stifling, almost suffocating. As Dr. Williams erased the board, his hand trembling not just with frustration, but with a hint of fear, he turned back, his gaze icy, determined to regain the upper hand, to salvage his reputation. The second problem reappeared, a monstrous, complex chain of derivatives, a fiendish blend of exponential and logarithmic functions, the kind of problem that even senior-level math students would struggle with for hours. He crossed his arms, his sinister smile returning, a mask for his inner turmoil. "Miss Leavitt," he said, his voice dripping with mockery, "if you're truly skilled, try this." Or was the first one just luck? Students whispered amongst themselves, some sneaking nervous glances at their notes, trying to even grasp the complexity of the problem. Reporters adjusted their cameras, sensing the escalating tension, the potential for a viral moment. Karoline Leavitt stepped up to the board, chalk in hand, her eyes quickly, almost hungrily, scanning the problem. She began writing, each step emerging with a crystalline clarity, breaking down the intricate chain, applying the chain rule with effortless precision, then simplifying the resulting function. She paused for a moment, turning to the class with a warm, almost mischievous smile. "Derivatives," she said, her voice youthful and engaging, "are about finding change, about understanding how things evolve, like predicting the trajectory of a political campaign." The brief, relatable explanation made a few students nod, as if the abstract world of calculus had suddenly become tangible, connected to their own lives. The chalk continued to glide across the board, and in just minutes, the complete answer appeared, flawlessly derived. She set the chalk down, looking directly at Dr. Williams. "Done, Professor," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. The room exploded in a cacophony of murmurs. "She did it again," a red-headed student whispered to her friend, her voice filled with awe. "So fast, like a human calculator," another added, his eyes glued to the board, trying to decipher the steps. Reporters scribbled furiously, their lenses zooming in on the board, capturing the irrefutable evidence of Leavitt's skill. But Dr. Williams wouldn't concede. He stepped forward, his eyes frantically scanning the answer, searching, desperately hoping for a flaw, a mistake, anything to discredit her. But everything was perfect, undeniably correct. His face flushed, his initial confidence crumbling, replaced by a growing sense of unease. "Miss," he cleared his throat, his voice losing its authoritative tone, "it seems you prepared well, but who knows? Did you really do it yourself?" As soon as the words left his lips, a male student with messy hair leaped up from the middle row, his face flushed with righteous indignation. "The professor's right," he shouted, his voice echoing through the hall. "How can she be that good? She must have memorized it beforehand." Murmurs spread through the room, some students nodding in agreement, their initial awe giving way to suspicion. A bespectacled girl whispered to her friend, "She's a press secretary, not a mathematician. Could she have cheated?" Dr. Williams smirked, triumphantly seizing the opportunity, the tide seemingly turning back in his favor. "Good point, Josh," he said to the student, then turned back to Leavitt, his voice regaining its mocking edge. "For fairness, why don't you solve a random problem from the textbook? Pick any page." The students fell silent, all eyes fixed on Leavitt, the pressure palpable. Reporters grinned, knowing this twist, this unexpected turn, would make headlines. But Leavitt didn't flinch. She nodded, a slight, almost amused smile playing on her lips. "Sure," she said, her voice calm and confident. She walked to the professor's desk, picked up the hefty copy of Calculus, early transcendentals that lay there, and flipped it open randomly to page 247. The problem that appeared was a high-order derivative, a tangled mess of nested trigonometric functions, even more challenging than the previous two. She picked up the chalk and, without a moment's hesitation, began writing. Each step was clear, precise, methodical, applying the product rule, taking partial derivatives, then simplifying the increasingly complex expression. The students held their breath, some secretly filming with their phones, capturing what they were witnessing. Dr. Williams stood aside, his hands clenched into fists, trying to maintain his calm facade. But as Leavitt finished the answer, once again undeniably correct, he couldn't hide his dismay. "Impossible," he muttered, his voice barely audible, rechecking the board, his eyes desperately searching for an error that wasn't there. The student's jaws dropped. Josh, the student who had doubted her, slumped back into his seat, his face red with embarrassment. She actually did it," a short-haired girl exclaimed, her voice filled with awe. "She's not just good, she's insanely fast," another added, her eyes gleaming with admiration. Leavitt set the chalk down, turning to Dr. Williams, her tone soft but undeniably defiant. "Any more doubts, Professor?" she asked. The room burst into applause, spontaneous and genuine, some students whistling their appreciation. Reporters smirked, knowing this clip, this moment of triumph, would go viral on X within hours. But Dr. Williams wasn't done. His face was flushed red, his hands gripping the chalk so tightly his knuckles were white. He erased the board with furious strokes, his movements jerky and uncontrolled. "Don't celebrate yet," he growled, his voice trembling with a mixture of frustration and desperation. "Think you're good? Try this." He began writing, lines emerging, forming a nonlinear differential equation, a monstrous concoction blending exponential functions and complex variables. The kind of problem that even seasoned professors rarely attempted to solve on the spot. The students' jaws dropped, some muttering amongst themselves. What even is that?" a bespectacled girl whispered to her friend, her voice filled with confusion. "I don't even understand the question, let alone how to solve it." Reporters zoomed in, capturing every chalk mark, sensing the final, climactic showdown. Dr. Williams stepped back, arms crossed, his eyes blazing with a desperate, almost manic intensity. "Miss Leavitt," he said, his voice triumphant, a last-ditch effort to regain control. "If you solve this, I'll quit teaching. Go ahead." The students fell dead silent, the air thick with tension, the atmosphere charged with an almost unbearable anticipation. This was it, the final battle. Josh, who had previously doubted Leavitt, bowed his head, his hands gripping his chair, his body rigid with tension. Everyone thought it was impossible, a problem far beyond the scope of the undergraduate curriculum, designed solely to crush her, to break her spirit. Reporters smirked, already crafting the headline in their minds. "Press Secretary fails impossible math challenge." Leavitt stood before the board, chalk in hand, her eyes scanning the equation, absorbing its complexity. She paused, longer than she had on the previous problems, prompting whispers among the students. "She can't do it," a messy-haired boy said quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of doubt and resignation. "Look, she's hesitating," the short-haired girl added, her voice anxious, her earlier admiration replaced by a creeping sense of disappointment. Dr. Williams grinned smugly, certain that he had finally, definitively won. But then, Leavitt turned to the class, a surprising, almost mischievous smile on her face. "Anyone want to tackle this with me?" she asked. The room froze. The students stared at her, bewildered. "Is she joking?" one student blurted out. "This isn't a group project," another protested, confused. But Leavitt shook her head, her voice gentle, persuasive. "Math is how we figure out the world together," she said. "Help me out." The students were stunned, caught completely off guard. But then, a timid girl with her hair tied high raised her hand, her voice shaky but determined. I think we need to separate the variables first," she suggested. Leavitt nodded, instantly starting to write based on the girl's suggestion, splitting the equation into two manageable parts, handling each function separately. "Good call," she praised, encouraging the girl. Then, she turned back to the class, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Who's got the next idea?" A bespectacled boy stood up, his voice gaining confidence. "Use a substitution," he suggested. "It'll simplify it." Leavitt smiled, immediately applying the substitution. The chalk racing across the board, the complex equation beginning to unravel, to yield to their collective effort. The students, initially hesitant, were gradually drawn in, whispers turning into lively discussions, a collaborative energy filling the room. "Add the constant," someone shouted. "Exactly," Leavitt replied, completing the final step, the solution taking shape. Dr. Williams stood aside, his hands limp at his sides, his triumphant grin completely gone. He hadn't expected this, hadn't anticipated that Leavitt would turn his personal challenge, his attempt at humiliation, into a collaborative learning experience. The equation was solved. She'd conquered the differential part, balanced both sides, and delivered a final, flawlessly executed answer. She set the chalk down, turning to the class, a genuine smile on her face. "Done," she said, her voice calm and confident. The room was silent for a beat, a pregnant pause, and then erupted in applause, cheers, and whistles, echoing through the hall, a wave of sound washing over them. "Unbelievable!" the short-haired girl shouted, her voice filled with excitement. "She actually did it!" the messy-haired boy exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. Reporters filmed frantically, knowing this unexpected turn of events, this moment of collective triumph, would dominate social media. Leavitt looked at Dr. Williams, her gaze free of arrogance, free of any hint of triumph over him. "Professor," she said, her voice soft but clear, "math isn't just about numbers. It's how I calculate policy impacts like economic forecasts or voter data analysis. It's all around us." The students nodded, some clapping again, a renewed sense of understanding dawning on their faces. The timid girl from earlier, the one who had offered the first suggestion, stood up, her voice bolder now. You made me think math is kind of fun," she said, a shy smile spreading across her face. Laughter broke out, rippling through the room, the tension dissipating, replaced by a lighter, more joyful atmosphere. But Dr. Williams didn't laugh. He stepped to the board, his eyes fixed on the answer, his hands trembling slightly. He checked each step, meticulously, searching for an error, a flaw, anything to cling to. But there was nothing. It was perfect. He turned back to Leavitt, his face pale, his voice faint, almost a whisper. How did you do it?" Leavitt smiled, a genuine, empathetic smile. "I learned because I was curious, Professor," she said. "Back at St. Anime, I used math to understand politics, from election trends to policy outcomes. It's not foreign to me. It's a tool I use every day." The students' jaws dropped, admiration mixing with awe. They were beginning to understand. Leavitt wasn't just a press secretary. She was something more, something unexpected. Reporters jotted down notes furiously, realizing the narrative had shifted yet again. Leavitt, not just a press secretary, a math genius. Dr. Williams stood there, his eyes blinking rapidly, his carefully constructed facade of superiority crumbling, his pride dissolving before him. He'd wanted to humiliate her, to expose her as a fraud, but now he'd been thoroughly, undeniably defeated. Not just in a mathematical duel, but in front of his own class, in front of the world. Applause echoed through the hall as Karoline Leavitt completed the seemingly impossible problem. Students stood, whistling and cheering, some shouting, "She's incredible!" Reporters filmed furiously, capturing Leavitt, standing calmly before the board. A quiet triumph in her eyes, the complex, nonlinear differential equation behind her serving as undeniable proof of her skill. But the vibe in the room wasn't just about victory. It was shifting, evolving. Students looked at Leavitt differently now, no longer seeing her as a distant, somewhat intimidating political figure, but as someone who had brought the abstract world of mathematics to life, making it relatable, even exciting. The timid girl, with her hair tied up, the one who had bravely offered the first suggestion, stepped closer to the board, her eyes shining with a newfound confidence. "Miss Leavitt," she said, her voice still a little shaky, but filled with genuine curiosity. How are you so good at this? I've never seen anyone solve a problem like that so fast." The room hushed, everyone awaiting Leavitt's response. She smiled, perching casually on the edge of the professor's desk, her demeanor relaxed and approachable. "I'm not a born genius," she began, her voice soft and reassuring. "At St. Anime, I taught myself advanced math to understand data, to analyze things like voter shifts and the potential impact of policy changes. Math is a tool I use in my work, not just a collection of numbers on a page." Students nodded, some murmuring, "That makes sense," their understanding deepening. Josh, the boy who had initially doubted her, stood up, his face red with shame. I'm sorry for thinking you cheated," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "But, how do you learn to be that good? You're so busy, right?" Leavitt laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "Busy, yeah," she admitted. "But I love a challenge. Being press secretary is, in a way, like solving a complex math problem. Finding order in chaos, making sense of seemingly disparate pieces of information. I learned because I'm curious, not because anyone forced me to." The students laughed along with her, the mood in the room easing even further. The tension completely dissipated. Reporters scribbled down notes, capturing the essence of the moment. Leavitt turns math into a political superpower. A bespectacled girl in the front row raised her hand timidly. "I'm terrible at math," she said, her voice quiet and filled with self-doubt. "Could I ever do what you do? I always thought I just wasn't smart enough." The question silenced the room, all eyes turning to Leavitt. She stepped closer to the girl, bending down slightly to meet her gaze, her expression filled with empathy. "I've been told that too," she shared, her voice soft and sincere. "When I started out, people said I was too young, too feminine, not good enough. But intelligence isn't something you're born with. It's something you build. If you're curious, if you're willing to work hard, and if you don't give up, you'll get there." The girl smiled, her eyes lighting up, a spark of hope ignited within her. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Other students started asking questions, their initial shyness replaced by a genuine desire to learn. "Are you ever afraid of failing?" a messy-haired boy asked. "Sure," Leavitt replied, without hesitation. "But failure teaches me more than success. Like that last problem. If I hadn't tried, if I hadn't been willing to risk failing, I'd never know I could do it." "Oh, I could." The class nodded, some jotting down her words, internalizing the lesson. The short-haired girl stood up, her voice filled with newfound enthusiasm. "You make me want to study math again," she declared at some. "It's not as dry and boring as I thought it was." Laughter rang out, the room buzzing with a fresh, invigorating energy. Reporters captured it all, knowing that Leavitt hadn't just won the mathematical challenge. She'd touched the hearts and minds of the students, inspiring them in a way that few professors ever could. Dr. Williams stood in the corner, his arms tightly crossed, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. He listened to every word Leavitt spoke, but inside, a storm raged. He'd wanted to disgrace her, to prove that she didn't belong, that she was an imposter. But now he felt small, insignificant. He watched the students, once in awe of him, now captivated by Leavitt, hanging on her every word. He wondered, a bitter taste in his mouth, where did I go wrong? Memories flooded back, memories of his own youth, when he'd been an activist, a passionate believer in the power of education to change the world. But somewhere along the way, he'd become arrogant, cynical, more concerned with protecting his own reputation than with inspiring his students. He'd used knowledge as a weapon, a tool to dominate rather than to empower. Leavitt wasn't just good at math. She'd done what he'd forgotten how to do: inspire. He stepped closer to the board, his hand brushing against Leavitt's perfectly derived answer, his eyes blinking rapidly, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. The students didn't notice his internal struggle, but the reporters caught it, the moment he wavered, the moment his carefully constructed facade began to crack. He took a deep breath, trying to maintain his tough exterior, but inside, he knew he'd lost. He'd lost, not just at math, but in vision, in purpose. Leavitt looked at him, her gaze not hostile, not triumphant, but empathetic, understanding. "Professor," she said quietly, her voice only for him. "Everyone messes up sometimes. What matters is what we learn from it." Her words pierced his pride like a dagger, a painful but necessary truth. The students whispered to each other, their eyes shining with admiration, some discreetly recording her words on their phones. Reporters stood in the corner, scribbling furiously, their lenses still trained on Leavitt, who sat casually on the edge of the professor's desk. She had turned a math challenge into a life lesson, shifting the entire class's perception of her, not just as the White House press secretary, but as someone who truly understood and conveyed the value of knowledge. Dr. Williams stood silently in the corner, his hands limp at his sides, his eyes fixed on the board, where Leavitt's nonlinear differential equation remained, a testament to her skill and his defeat. The students' chatter and laughter stabbed at his pride. He'd wanted to humiliate her, to make her a laughingstock. But now, he felt utterly out of place, a stranger in his own classroom. He took a deep breath, stepped closer to the board, and lightly touched Leavitt's flawless answer. The students quieted, noticing the subtle shift in his demeanor. Reporters zoomed in, sensing a pivotal moment was near, a turning point in the unfolding drama. "All right," Dr. Williams spoke, his voice low and slow, a stark contrast to his earlier sarcasm and bravado. He turned to Leavitt, his gaze no longer hostile, but filled with a mixture of reflection and regret. "Leavitt," he said, pausing briefly, as if gathering the courage to speak the words that were burning in his throat. "I was wrong. I thought you were just a young politician, relying on fame and looks. But today you proved me completely wrong." The room fell dead silent, stunned by his admission, his unexpected vulnerability. Josh's jaw dropped. The bespectacled girl smiled faintly, as if they had just witnessed the impossible. Leavitt looked at him, her eyes warm, devoid of any hint of triumph. She stood, stepping closer to him, her voice gentle and understanding. "Thank you, Professor," she said. "But everyone makes mistakes. I've been underestimated too, for being young, for being a woman, for not fitting the mold. What matters is what we learn from it." Her words were like a gentle breeze, easing the tense atmosphere, soothing the wounds of pride. Students nodded, a few clapping softly, not to mock Dr. Williams, but to support the sincerity, the rawness of the moment. Dr. Williams bowed his head for a second, then looked up, his voice softer, more human than it had been all day. "I've taught math for decades," he continued, "but today you taught me a bigger lesson. You're not just skilled. You made these students want to learn, want to understand. I'd forgotten that. Forgotten that education isn't about showing off, but about inspiring." He pointed to the board, where Leavitt's answer still shone clearly. "You did what I couldn't do today." The students clapped louder, whistles ringing out again, this time for both Leavitt, for her undeniable talent, and for Dr. Williams, for his rare and courageous humility. The short-haired girl stood, laughing loudly. "Professor, thanks to you, we got the best class ever." Laughter spread through the room, the students agreeing, the tension completely broken. "Yeah," the messy-haired boy shouted. "Calling Miss Leavitt to the board was a genius move." Dr. Williams gave his first genuine smile of the session, still a bit awkward, a bit hesitant, but real. He looked at Leavitt, nodding slightly, as if fully accepting his defeat, acknowledging her victory, not just in mathematics, but in something far more profound. Reporters jotted down their final lines, capturing the essence of the moment. Dr. Williams admits mistake, a viral moment in the making. Leavitt stepped forward, shaking his hand, a gesture of respect, of reconciliation. "Professor," she said, her voice sincere, "you didn't lose. You helped me prove that math isn't just a test. It's how we understand each other, how we understand the world." Dr. Williams gripped her hand, squeezing it lightly, his eyes glistening, as if rediscovering something he'd lost long ago. "You're right," he replied, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I was too proud. Thank you, Leavitt." The students clapped again, this time longer, louder, like a song of reconciliation, a celebration of understanding between two former adversaries. Reporters filmed the final scene, knowing this video, this story, would spread, not just for Leavitt's mathematical prowess, but for this rare, beautiful moment. A professor admitting fault, acknowledging his mistake, before his class, before the world. Students whispered to each other, "She's amazing, but the professor's cool for saying that." Yeah, not everyone can do that, especially after the handshake of reconciliation between Karoline Leavitt and Dr. Williams. The students clapped, laughed, and the room buzzed with positive energy. Reporters stood in the corner, scribbling furiously, their lenses capturing Leavitt standing amidst the class, smiling warmly, and Dr. Williams stepping back, his gaze pensive but relieved. The session wasn't just a battle of wits. It had become an experience, a transformative moment that had changed how people saw math, each other, and themselves. Leavitt stepped to the center of the room, raising a hand to quiet the crowd. "Thank you all for joining me today," she said, her voice youthful yet captivating. "Math isn't just numbers on a board. It's how we understand the world around us, from politics and economics to everyday life. I hope you see it's not something to be scared of, but a tool for discovery." Students nodded, some whispering, "She's so right." The timid girl with her hair tied up stood laughing. "You make me want to start all over with math. I've never seen it this fun." Laughter erupted, the class agreeing wholeheartedly. The bespectacled boy raised his hand. "Miss Leavitt, do you think anyone can get good at math if they try?" Leavitt nodded, her eyes lighting up. "Absolutely," she replied. "I wasn't great at it at first. At St. Anime, I struggled with data analysis, but I was curious. I tried, I learned, and I kept going. You can too, just don't give up." The students clapped, not for the solution to a tough problem, but for the belief she had instilled in them, the belief in their own potential. Reporters added a final note. "Leavitt, not just a math whiz, she motivates like a seasoned teacher." The short-haired girl jumped up, her voice excited. "I have decided I'm going to take math seriously thanks to you." The room cheered, some whistling in support. Josh, who had doubted Leavitt earlier, laughed loudly. "Me too, Professor." He turned to Dr. Williams. "You've got to bring her back again." The students roared with laughter, turning to Dr. Williams, who stood quietly, observing the scene. He smiled faintly, nodding. "I'll consider it," he said, his brief words carrying a weight of unspoken understanding, a subtle acknowledgement that he had, indeed, changed. Leavitt turned to Dr. Williams, stepping closer, her voice quiet, just for him. "Professor," she said, "thank you for this challenge. It didn't just help me. It showed these students how important, how relevant math really is." Dr. Williams looked at her, his eyes shimmering with a newfound respect, then shook her hand again. "No," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "Thank you. I've taught for years, but today, I learned from you. I learned that education is about sharing, about inspiring, not about competing or showing off. You did better than me." The students didn't hear their private exchange, but reporters zoomed in, capturing the intimate moment, knowing this quiet exchange, this mutual respect, would touch millions online. The class gradually stood, crowding around Leavitt, firing questions at her. "How do you balance work and learning? Do you have any tricks for staying focused?" Leavitt laughed, answering each question with patience and genuine enthusiasm, her tone friendly, approachable, like a peer rather than a distant authority figure. Reporters left, carrying with them footage of the entire saga. From Dr. Williams' initial harsh challenge, Leavitt's calm and brilliant responses, the doubts, the accusations, to the final, unexpected reconciliation and inspiration. A messy-haired student whipped out his phone, filming Leavitt chatting with the students, then posted it on X with the caption, "Karoline Leavitt just made math class the best ever. Haj Leavitt math genius. Mahmoud's unexpected inspiration. It spread fast, dozens of comments popping up. She's so cool. Dr. Williams rocks too, for admitting he was wrong. I want to study math now. Leavitt exited amidst applause, leaving behind a buzzing, energized atmosphere. Students clustered together, discussing the events, their perspectives forever altered. She made me believe I can push myself harder, one student said. Math's not a nightmare anymore, another added. A bespectacled girl turned to her friend. I'm signing up for advanced math next semester thanks to her. Leavitt's impact didn't stop at the lecture hall. It rippled outwards, touching everyone in the room, reshaping their views on learning, on their own potential, on the power of humility and open-mindedness. Dr. Williams lingered last, staring at the empty board, an odd sense of relief settling over him. He recalled his initial intent, to humiliate Leavitt, to protect his own reputation, his own ego. But now, he felt grateful. She'd beaten him, yes, but not just with skill, but with sincerity, with grace, with a genuine passion for learning and sharing that knowledge. She'd helped him rediscover the true meaning, the true purpose of teaching. He smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile, and muttered, She's right. It's what we learn that matters. He left the room, carrying with him a lesson far bigger, far more profound than any equation he'd ever taught. The lecture hall quieted as Karoline Leavitt departed, her footsteps fading down the hall. Students still huddled together, buzzing about what had just transpired. She made me believe math isn't that hard, the short-haired girl said, her eyes gleaming with newfound confidence. Yeah, she turned it into a game, a challenge, something. Fun. Josh, who had doubted her earlier, laughed, checking his ex-post. The likes now passed 1,000. Reporters left too, carrying the full video from Dr. Williams's harsh challenge and the Leavitt's triumphant responses to the handshake of peace and the inspiring aftermath. This story, they knew, wouldn't end here. It was just the beginning. Dr. Williams stood alone in the empty classroom, late afternoon light streaming through the window, illuminating the board where Leavitt's differential equation had once shown. He touched the board, feeling the leftover chalk dust, his heart heavy yet strangely light. He recalled that morning, stepping into the lecture hall with the intent to disgrace Leavitt, to make her a laughingstock and safeguard his own status. But now he felt small, not from losing, but from realizing how his pride had blinded him for so long. He muttered, "How did I get it so wrong?" Memories flooded back. Memories of his early days as a teacher, young and passionate, believing education could change the world. But over the years, he'd become someone who just defended his position, using knowledge to dominate rather than to share. Leavitt had done what he'd forgotten. She didn't just solve problems. She made students love them, believe in their own ability to understand. He smiled, for the first time that day without forcing it. A genuine smile. She's right, he told himself. True intelligence isn't about fame or power. It's the passion to learn and the courage to admit when you're wrong. Outside, Josh's ex-post was spreading like wildfire. Karoline Leavitt just knocked out our math class. #Leavitt math genius, #unexpected professor, it read, paired with a short clip of Leavitt solving the problem and chatting with students. Comments flooded in. She's incredible. Dr. Williams is cool for owning up. I want to study math now. The reporter's YouTube video went up too, titled Press Secretary versus Professor, Shocking Outcome. Views soared with hundreds of comments like, Leavitt's a genius. She makes me want to go back to school. This is the best math class ever. The session's impact stretched far beyond the lecture hall walls, reaching thousands through screens, sparking conversations and inspiring a new perspective on learning. Dr. Williams turned off the classroom lights, stepping into the hall, briefcase in hand. He paused, looking out at the campus, where students still gathered in small groups talking animatedly about Leavitt. He caught snippets of their conversations. She made me believe I can be better. The professor's not bad either, admitting that in front of everyone. He smiled, a warmth spreading inside him. He wasn't the center of attention anymore, but that was okay. Leavitt had taught him a lesson bigger than any mathematical concept, a lesson about humility, about opening up to learn from others, no matter who they were, no matter their age or background. He muttered, "Thank you, Leavitt," and then walked off, his figure fading into the sunset. On social media, #LeavittMathGenius trended across X. The YouTube video hit tens of thousands of views in its first hour. St. Anime students shared the story with friends, a few even signing up for advanced math classes that very night. The bespectacled girl, who'd asked Leavitt about her potential, sat in her dorm room, opened her math book and smiled. "I'll try, just like she said," she whispered to herself. Leavitt's impact wasn't just a single class. It was a spark, igniting belief, curiosity, and passion in everyone who'd witnessed it, directly or indirectly. Dr. Williams got home, sat at his desk, and opened his email. He typed a short, heartfelt message to Leavitt. "Thank you for today. You changed me and you changed the class. I learned more than I taught." He hit send, then leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He knew he'd never forget this day, the day he'd set out to humiliate someone, only to be redeemed by her grace, her intelligence, and her unwavering belief in the power of learning. Leavitt, somewhere out there, unaware of the email, had left an indelible mark, not just as a math genius, but as a reminder that true intelligence comes from passion and openness, transcending all prejudice or status. What do you think? How can we apply the lessons from this story to our own lives and communities? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories and insightful analysis.